Before we dive in, I need you to hear this. Silence may have been your survival, but it's not your story's end. Before you hit play, take a breath. This one's for the version of you who was told to be quiet, the one who stopped speaking to stay safe. Your voice still matters. Welcome to Unveiled. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Unveiled, the podcast, the space where masks come off, truth comes forth, and freedom begins. I'm your host, Taylor Picot. And last episode, we explored the sacred power of vulnerability. This week, we take a step even deeper into reclamation. Today's episode is personal. It's a layer that is bold, and honestly, it's overdue. I want to talk about something. I want to talk about your voice, the one life tried to shut down, the one trauma has buried, the one shame has silenced, the one culture tried to tame. And whether it's been by pain, by patriarchy, perfectionism, or even just survival, somewhere along the way, you may have been silenced and you stopped speaking. Maybe it was too risky. Maybe you were told to hush. Maybe the words just got too heavy. Well, I would say that it's time to get it back. Yet again, another invitation. And this episode is more than just vocal cords. It's about permission. It's about purpose. It's about power. Because silence isn't always safety. You know, sometimes it's suffocation. And I would say that your voice is holy ground. And today, we're going to do what we can to reclaim it. Now, each episode, as we know, has essentially become an invitation that has led us into something deeper, to something more. So let's go ahead and get into it, right? Because I believe that there is something that has silenced your voice. And I want us to first take a moment before we further ourselves in this conversation to pause. I want us to pause and explore what even has silenced your voice, to lay a foundation in the conversation today. You know, silence isn't always safety. I believe that it's strategy, and at least sometimes. And there's so many ways our voices get shut down. Maybe it was a parent who said children should be seen and not heard. Maybe it was a teacher who called you disruptive. Maybe it was even a church that labeled your questions and your curiosity rebellion. Or even just simply culture that said your tone was too angry, your volume too loud, your truth too inconvenient. Well, for whatever it has been for you, maybe one of those resonate. But whatever your narrative is, you didn't stop speaking because you had nothing to say. I can almost guarantee that you stopped speaking because somewhere along the line, it stopped feeling safe to say it. We learn pretty early that our voice has consequences. But here's a deeper truth. Though silence may have protected you then, it's choking you now. And silence has a cost. Now, scientifically, when we suppress our voice, especially during trauma, the brain enters a survival state. We talked about this a little earlier when we were talking about the making of the mask, that freeze and fawn state. Over time, this muting of expression rewires the nervous system to associate speaking up with danger. You essentially begin to equate quiet with safety. But I want to ask you this question: at what cost? When you're silent too long, you forget your power. And there are many, many, many ways that we're silenced. You know, one of the ways that we're silenced, I want to actually name these out because you may identify with one of these things and it may resonate with you. One of the ways that we're silenced is simply through gender roles. As a woman, we're often labeled too emotional or too assertive. When it comes to culture, our voices are policed, are tokenized. You know, another reason is simply just trauma, abuse, neglect, or manipulation teach us to stay quiet in order to survive. In religion, be humble gets twisted oftentimes into be silent. And silence might feel safe, but it comes at a price. And when we silence ourselves for too long, there's some things that happen. We disconnect from our needs. We forget our truth. We numb our intuition. We lose clarity on who we are. And that's not just emotional. I would say it's very spiritual. It's physical, it's psychological. And the longer that you stay silent, the more you actually begin to doubt that you have anything worth saying. You forget actually how powerful you are. You question at moments your right to even speak up. You convince yourself that quiet is peace when it's really a cage. But silence doesn't equal humility, and suppression doesn't equal peace. And I just want to let you know that you were never meant to shrink. You were meant to speak. Your voice isn't rebellion, it's restoration. And you actually have a right to your voice. Now, throughout history, we see people who try to silence themselves. And you know, God said otherwise. Today, I want to actually take a look at a few familiar stories that, you may know. One of those stories I want to take a look at is Esther, a young Jewish woman who was made queen in a very hostile kingdom. You know, she was told to hide her identity until it was time to speak up. And her moment came. And Mordecai, he said this. He said, "Perhaps you were born for such a time as this." Now, I don't have all the time to get into the deep, deep, deep depths of the story of Esther, but she was reminded yet in a moment that it was time to use her voice, that she can no longer suppress and silence the thing that was needed to activate something in the earth. You may be familiar with the story of Moses. Moses told God, "I can't speak." And God used him anyway. God said, "I made your mouth. I'm the one that will be with you." Then we have Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah, as we know, he thought he was too young to speak. He said, "Who would even listen to me? Who would listen to such a young boy like me?" And God said, "Do not say I am only a youth. I'm the one that put my words in your mouth." And so here what we see is that all of them wanted to shrink. And just these three examples of Esther, Moses, Jeremiah. But purpose called their voice forward. And I want to remind you that I'm not talking about platform here. Your voice is a divine assignment. Your voice is a sacred trust. And even if you feel like none of this resonates with you or you don't identify with scripture, I want you to consider this. Your voice holds power. It holds power to heal. It holds power to disrupt. It holds power to awaken. And it's not accidental, it's intentional. And purpose has always had a sound. I'm not talking about platform. And that sound, I want to remind you, I want to tell you that that sound is you. Now, when it comes to this whole idea of reclaiming our voice, because that's what we're speaking about in today's episode, I believe, it is of my personal belief, that reclaiming begins with safe practice. Let's be clear here. Reclaiming your voice doesn't mean mic. It doesn't mean platform. That's not the conversation we're having. I'm talking about freedom for yourself. And it starts with a whisper. Sometimes that's in a form of a journal. Sometimes that's in form of a trusted friend. But it starts with truth. Things like, I don't want this. This hurt me. I need more. I'm not okay. It might sound like a journal. It might sound like a boundary. It might sound like finally answering the question, how are you? When's the last time you actually asked yourself that and really responded in a way that was real? There's so many ways that you can actually try this. There's so many ways that you can actually activate this and put this into practice. This can simply be starting a journal. You can finish this sentence just by saying, if I were afraid, I would say ... and fill in the blank. I want you to practice saying one hard truth, even if it's just to yourself. And this is the reason why I want you to put this into practice, because neurologically speaking, it activates what we know, or what we call the prefrontal cortex, which is tied to logic. It's tied to our decision making. And speaking truth, even if it's in private, even if it's with yourself, right? It rewires the brain for empowerment. Your voice, yours, is advocacy. Your expression, your access to healing. And speaking doesn't always require an audience. Sometimes the first person you have to tell the truth to is who? Yourself. I want us to relearn. I'm doing this with you. I want us to relearn what safety sounds like. As we know, we've been tying in, from one episode to another, 2 Corinthians 3:18. And I want us to come back to this scripture yet again that has really been holding us together since we started out together. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed. I don't know if you've been keeping up to this very moment, to this very point, but by now I'm hoping that actually resonates with you, or it means something to you, or in your own way, you've been able to define it. With unveiled face. I said it on the last episode, or I said it in another conversation we had, but you cannot be transformed while muting your truth. You can't be free, if we're talking about freedom, because that's what this podcast is centered around. But you cannot be free while shrinking in silence. You can't be unveiled and voiceless. The veil itself, it's what lifts when we stop pretending. And sometimes the most powerful unveiling starts with just one sentence of truth. You know, unveiled face. What does that mean? It means no longer masking your sound. It means a voice restored. It means expression returned. This form of unveiling, it's not just about what's seen, but it's about what's heard. And you, if you're here with me, the purpose of what our conversation, the purpose of this is that you ought to be transformed in the process. And transformation doesn't happen just in one conversation. It doesn't just happen in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and however many episodes. It's something that happens over time. But what I do know that transformation requires is it requires expression. It requires honesty, and freedom has a sound, and it's time for you to activate that sound. Your voice, it's a divine instrument. Heaven and healing are on the other side of your sound. You've been seeking, you've been so deeply in search for healing for your soul. And could I tell you that you can simply activate the healing that you've been desperately seeking just through a sound? By you opening up your mouth and sometimes recalling back to yourself, telling yourself, again, it's not about a mic. It's not about a platform. It's not about a camera. It's not about any of those things. It's just about you. It's about you opening up your mouth and you being able to safely speak your truth. You know, more than likely when you came out the womb from birth, you were crying. And so what this tells me that you were born with a voice to cry out, to advocate, to declare truth, to lift others. And whether you know God or whether you know him deeply or whether you're still on a journey where you are seeking to know him, I want you to know that this still holds true for you. Your voice was never meant to be silenced. It was never meant to be silenced by fear. It was never meant to be silenced by culture or conditioning. Your voice is an instrument, a very much powerful instrument. You know, and instruments, they were meant to ring with truth. It was meant to disrupt systems. It was meant to free you. And it is my belief. It is my belief. You can challenge this belief, but it is my belief that when you free yourself, those around you have an opportunity to be set free. Where trauma told you to be quiet, because we've all been through something. If you're on the other side of this and you're hearing the sound of my voice, there's something that you have experienced in your lifetime. There's something that you have went through in your lifetime. And when trauma told you to be quiet, I want to let you know that healing tells you to rise. And where shame says, don't say that. Grace, as we know, I'm going to continue to say this because I need you to get it. Grace says, say it again. And God, he doesn't require perfection. He actually honors honesty. And honesty often begins with reclaiming your voice. There are so many ways and things you can do to reclaim your voice. You know what? I would be doing not only just myself a disservice, but I would be doing us all, those of you who are listening, a complete injustice if I didn't give us an opportunity to actually put some of these things into real practice. Because I don't care about you tuning in, listening in, and yet you are not being transformed or you're not changing So I want to put this in practice. And one of the ways that I want to do this is this week, I want you to speak up in one area where you usually would decide to shrink, or even just try to say one thing out loud to yourself, or even a safe person. Maybe you have that friend or someone who you can trust and confide in. Because I need you to know that in this, your voice matters. Not just what you say, but what you choose to stop suppressing. Your voice is holy ground. I don't want you to silence what life has tried to erase. Don't shriek for someone else's comfort. Don't whisper when there's a truth that's roaring inside of you and it's waiting for you to open your mouth. You're not too much. You're not too loud. You're not too late. Your voice is holy ground. How dare you silence what God or this world is trying to use to bring yourself freedom, to bring freedom in the world. The world needs the version of you that doesn't whisper to be safe. I want to end here today, and we all, with unveiled face. I want to remind you that you're being transformed. And part of that process of transformation is you're being transformed by sound, by truth, by the sacred return of your voice. Give yourself. I am begging you to give yourself permission to reclaim your voice. If you don't do it for anybody else, for once, make up in your mind that you're going to do it for yourself. There's things in your life that deserve to be unlocked. And until you find the words, until you find the language, you may not even know how to fully articulate what it is that you're trying to express or you're trying to share. But can I just open your mouth, even if it's a mumble? I can guarantee you that if you start there, something miraculous will happen on the other side of that. Make space for you in this season. Do it for you. So these will continue. We will continue to have, because reclamation is a process. It's not just one and done moment. It's not just a one and done moment. It's a process. And so we're going to continue to weave in this conversation to other conversations that we have during our time. But I want to thank you for joining me for this episode of Unveiled the Podcast. If this message at all, in any form, if it resonated with you, what I want you to do is I want you to share it. Speak it, write it, live it, whatever. Subscribe to the channel, as I always say, hit the notification bell, and follow us if you're not yet following us on social media. Follow us on social media at Unveiled on Pod. I'm your host, Taylor Picot, and again, this is Unveiled the Podcast. This week, not next week, this week, I want you to show up. I want you to keep showing up seen, heard, and unveiled. And you don't have to be loud to be powerful. You just have to be heard by yourself. So stay honest, stay bold, stay unveiled. Until next time.